I'm thrilled to welcome Hal Sparks, my favorite Semite, and with that, let's just dive into that. Like the idea of we both have kids. We've
Yeah,
presumably taught them to read, right? So I
yeah.
can we can understand that reading words for children can be a challenge. Look, the English language is like the first time I
It's fraught with
read
peril.
and
Yeah,
absolutely read and saw the word quinoa. A very nice waiter
sure.
completely eviscerated me in terms of my mispronunciation. But
Yeah.
Hal, I mean, is it unreasonable to say, like, I don't know, you should know how to read a teleprompter, you should be able to pronounce words correctly?
Well, let's start with the idea that Donald Trump ran on the premise that he would never need a teleprompter and that anybody who did was weak and that people who can't speak off the cuff are somehow just, if you can't extemporaneously blurt out all policies and ideas, you're somehow a flawed politician and weak. And then go back to less than, a week later, he was using a teleprompter and now he's reading with his finger on pieces of paper in a way that an 8-year-old doing a book report would do. It is almost like it's like Mork from Mork, except instead of drinking with his finger, he reads. And so there's this really odd thing of watching. I on my stream, I watch him every single day,
Yeah, I
and it's
noticed.
it's getting increasingly worse.
Yeah,
But the the part about, like, I think Yosemite being a mispronunciation or whatever, like, I give people a lot of latitude to screw up
sure.
when you're in the public a lot. I really, really do. However, that's in a speech about the great outdoors.
Right.
It was specific. It didn't hit him out of the blue. It wasn't like, they had to, in a reference about environmental law and how they're trying to progress and what, grazing lands property rights are for the Bundys and all that kind of stuff. That in the process, he went, foreign buyers are trying to buy land or whatever, and Yosemite, he didn't fix it like that.
Right, right. No,
He approached it as a man who's never seen it before and doesn't know what the word itself looks like on paper, which is insanity for a grown human being. He's from the Manhattan skyline. As much as he's trying to play this whole, like, I believe in the flyover states and Midwestern and the forgotten American, he would step over any Midwesterners. He'd step on their face to get a snow cone. There is no point where he's aware of the great out. Donald Trump is not a hiker. Okay, you know what I'm saying? Like, that's not. He doesn't go hunting. He doesn't go ATVing. Ozzy Osbourne was in an accident ATVing.
right.
Donald Trump can't drive a car. You understand? Like,
Yeah, well,
the disconnect is real.
do you remember Dick Cheney going hunting and shooting that guy in the face full of buckshot? I
Sure.
mean, at least, and Dick Cheney was what, on his 12th human heart. I mean, at that point, you
That
know,
well,
12,
human in air
human,
quotes.
right, right.
I'm not 100% convinced that's not why he's rejecting him. We keep putting human hearts in. Can we try to bat one? Maybe that'll stick.
but that's the point. Is even Dick Cheney, who probably shouldn't be walking upstairs because there's a high risk he could have a heart
Yeah,
attack between
keel
the third
over.
and fourth stair. He's out there like in the outdoors. You're right. Donald Trump is a McDonald's eating, Diet Coke drinking,
Yeah,
tacky Queens gold toilet guy, right? Like that's what
right.
he is.
Yeah, curly Q furniture, crappy new money tastes. Hates probably the sun and the wind in a way that none of us can fathom, and not just for what it seems to do to his hair when it's not properly sprayed down. It comes up like a sewer lid in a horror film. Just gonna tank. No, there is no. It's not surprising to me that he screwed up Yosemite. I mean, I have drops on my show that I've grabbed over time because of all this whole Joe Biden has dementia idea. Which let me explain something to the folks who like to play around with that. Knock yourself out. Please continue to say that Joe Biden has dementia. It was the same mistake the Sanders campaign made, and when Biden trounced Sanders in the final debate between the two of them, part of the reason why he was so easily successful was because of this narrative. So
Right.
Trump is welcome to that narrative. But secondly, Trump himself called Mike Pence's wife Carrot Pence. His man, man, person, woman,
Woman.
he, whatever. I don't
Yeah,
care.
right.
And his, like, you can't throw they're throwing cans of soup because you can't throw a brick because bricks are too heavy. I gather these all the time. And then beyond that, when he mispronounces a word, these are the key things. When Biden makes a mistake, he corrects his mistake.
Right.
He goes, "Oh, did I say 1,000? Or when I meant a million, or a million when I said 1,000?" If you say that to him, he'll go, "Did I? Oh," like we all do when we screw up.
But how isn't that a perfect example? I mean, you're a well-seasoned media guy. I mean, isn't that a perfect example of, you get in front of the camera, you're in the public eye, you go into a different mode. It's not uncommon to have really a gaffe, right? An honest gaffe, which has nothing to do with dementia or cognitive ability. I think you're absolutely right. The ability to recognize that, in fact, after you've said it and go back and correct it. I actually think that takes more mental, awareness than it would to not to catch the gaffe up. I'm not saying I'm not encouraging people to make gaffes, but to be aware that you've done something and go back. I think actually, honestly, it would be like Trump saying the cognitive test of, was it woman, person, woman, man, camera, TV, like, oh, well, they asked me that 10 minutes later. It takes that same mental awareness, and to do that in what is often a very stressful situation. You're right. To me, that eviscerates the idea.
Is the ego of it, because beyond just recognizing you made a mistake and being able to fumper and fix that mistake when a teleprompter goes south, or there's a delay between you talking to somebody on the news, whatever, or giving a speech in a crowd and you do it a dozen times and you lose your place or whatever goes on. Beyond that, being able to be called out on it, or you say it and you go, "Oh, that was a mistake. I meant that as a mistake."
Sure.
Versus what Donald Trump does, which is double down and say, essentially, "I meant to say that." That's more concerning even than whether or not two older men are having issues with, "Why did I come in here? Oh, yeah, here's my keys." And by the way, anybody who throws stones in that area, especially as we've all been in quarantine, like, "Why am I standing in the kitchen? I've already eaten 3 times today." But Trump's whole thing is he'll add the word to what was actually in the teleprompter. So he literally said at one point, "counting the dead," but he screwed up the counting the dead and said "cutting," and then kept the word "cutting" as if we're cutting up dead people. And it would be one thing if it was just some dude on the news and who cares, but he's so egomaniacal about this stuff and so defensive, he could start insisting it is not out of the question. Like, "Yeah, no, we have to cut up the bodies. They have to be burned. It's like they're vampires." He could double down where it's an element of policy, or a weird hard line where you could move on to talk about stuff that needs to be talked about, but he's still dug in talking about that BS from 10 minutes ago, where he's saying, no, I did mean cutting. I mean, and like, that's germane to nothing. There are missiles being launched. There was he's still stuck on the idea that there was a bombing in Lebanon.
All I can say to that, Hal, is it is what it is, right?
Right.
I mean, that's his answer. Like, 150,000 plus Americans have died.
1,000 dead a day. It is what it is.
Yeah.
And I think that's where he's starting to lose the Republicans, that he's starting to lose, is that they're recognizing that his sort of asshole-ish, grandiose, verbosity about his worth in the world and his usefulness was adorable at first as just kind of like a bravado, salesman kind of an angle. But when it started translating itself into failed policy that's costing tens of thousands of American lives, and there is no other way to perceive this than that has actually happened. 60 to 70,000 American lives have been lost that need not have been lost, and will be lost between now and December that need not be lost because of the policy choices and the inability of this man to even contemplate how he may be wrong or misreading a situation. And I think a lot of Republicans are going, "Okay, I got to take one on the chin right now for my conservative beliefs, and I'm not voting for this guy. We can regroup. We recovered after horrible 8 years of Obama and the terrible Clinton years and managed to be president again once we got reshaped. Maybe we need to suck it up and admit that this guy was a mistake."
I don't even know what back to school is going to look like. I don't know. I feel like we're already on the way to kind of all looking like the dude from The Big Lebowski, just looking for a rug to tie the room together. Like, it's just,
Yeah, that's what you call me.
so wait, but my question for that is, okay, so the big question is schools, right? The big question is teachers. The big question is it safe? Is it, how are we going to do virtual learning? Can we just answer the real burning question no one's asking? What's back to school fashion going to look like this year? Do you have any?
Yeah, just so hazmat suits. Yeah,
hazmat suits.
Everybody, like, I'm sending my kid to school in the new SpaceX suits. I think that's the safest.
The new space.
Yeah, my kid, it's always Halloween, and my kid is always going as Dustin Hoffman from Outbreak. That's the. There's a little bit of to truth to that in that regard, and there is, as much as Trump goes on and on about the Swedish herd experiment, in reality, the reason he keeps bringing it up is because here it was his idea. When he said, why don't we just let it roll?
Right.
People were saying, someone came up to me and they said, sir, why don't we just let it roll? That was him. He's admitted multiple times that he was the one that brought that up to Birx and Fauci. He's the one that continually brings that up. And when it comes to the schools, this is basically his second shot at a low-res version of a herd immunity strategy. Just let the kids get it. If the parents are strong, and you hear this word all the time. When he was watching this guy get convalescent plasma. Ew. He always pronounces it plasma. Ew. He was at the Red Cross, and next day they show that picture of him with the bruise, which just to me says they took him there to get some convalescent plasma from a poor man.
Right.
Oh, they're just dumping it on the floor. I'll just get some, and now he's immune, right? He was talking to this guy, and the guy said, what was it like getting the coronavirus? And the guy said, well, it was really bad for a few days, but then, it kind of teetered off, and now I feel like I can help. And he goes, strong. He kept going, strong, or whatever.
Yeah. That all sounds great, and that all sounds like this wonderful idea that Donald Trump has, but then his own kid isn't going back to school. So if we're talking about herd immunity, I don't even know if he's aware of that. I don't know if that's completely malign. And look, that honestly, my personal opinion is that's absolutely the responsible thing to do. But how do you, again, but part of that is Trump's belief on schools, but the other part of it is Trump's overarching ego-driven sort of approach that says, do as I say, not as I do, right? It's not a perfect example of, of him just...
There's rich America and there's the rest of America. And that's been Donald Trump's way of life his entire existence. As a matter of fact, it's been not only how he views the world, but also the acceptable way to view the world in his books and in his presentation, and The Apprentice, which was a garbage show, and The Celebrity Apprentice was an embarrassing version of a garbage show. It was a game show. It was not a reality show. Let's be really abundantly clear. He's a failed game show host, and he was the host of a show that's value was in its embarrassment. It was not its quality. It was how embarrassing people would embarrass them in front of an embarrassing man, embarrass themselves in front of an embarrassing man. And that was why people watched that show. It was a prurient show, it wasn't Shark Tank. He thinks it's Shark Tank. We all know it's Survivor. It's Naked and Afraid New York edition, right?
And there was a level of humiliation, right? That was the point of it.
It was like rich people or people who want a real business having to open up a lemonade stand on a street because Donald Trump told them to. And that's not about learning anything. That's about, and it was his show, but the producers picked who won and who went forward. It was just, he was shuffled around as the host. But overall, he still views that as true. He still views, the idea that he's educated because Joe Shapiro took his SATs for him and somebody else passed his class for him. That means he's educated. And you're uneducated because you went to another school but actually took the classes yourself.
But he's also lived, as you said, a life where he's the one humiliating people. Look at the, and which brings me to the Axios interview. You look at that, and you look at the, even the Fox interview before that. These are cringeworthy. It really was painful to watch, and it reminded me it's the equivalent of like getting my mom an Alexa for Christmas and then her calling me every couple, just like not understanding how to use it and then just being like, we're going to return it. It's just easier for you to call me if you have a question rather than ask Alexa. Does he not, and do his handlers not understand how terrible he looks doing that? I mean, is that just an inability to have any self-awareness or any self-assessment?
Look, by the end of Michael Jackson's life, he was on trial, or had multiple accusations of child molestation and all kinds of stuff. And he was still showing up to court in a space general outfit.
Right.
There's an element where certain people go past the tipping point where if they did have a person around them that could tell them the truth, they have jettisoned that person a long time ago for somebody who, goes, no, the space general. I would go with space general when you're going to court for enticing children to your house with a carnival.
Maybe drive an ice cream truck. I mean, what?
Right? Yeah. Why not pull up in there in a clown out? Why go as Pennywise? How about that? Like
with a red balloon.
Yes, and Trump himself has increasingly paired out in his life anyone who would call BS on what he's doing, and now it's especially bad because the consequences of it. Once he's written off by the people around him, then the only benefit to them for him at all is staying in the press and having the validity of being infamous versus famous going forward. The post-Trump presidency, where he fends off some tax issues, sells a couple of pieces of property, pays some fines, blames a kid, firewalls one of his 2,200 LLCs and blames that, whoever was on paper in charge, Michael Cohen or David Pecker or something, for the failure of a building or the charities or any of that stuff, where he, because he was president, dodges any real legal ramifications. The only benefit for him after this is an OAN level complaint fest till the end of time, till his brain fades into nothingness. And that's the goal right now. And the only way you have that is if he's basically the troll in chief during what would be his second term. And they now know that. Right. And everybody else has stopped worrying about whether he's going to get reelected. They know the numbers are real. They know it's, and the only thing they can think, the sycophants around him who actually do, the fart sniffers who actually think it's potpourri, the only thing they can think is maybe he has the magic about the media that we've been told he has. Right. The media is constantly going, it's amazing. He's got this ability to control the media.
This is the day he's become president.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, he's changing tone.
Right.
He's, he really knows how to dig into people and find their weaknesses and blah, blah, blah. Instead of, no, you've been humoring this asshole for decades and ignoring people who are genuine successes because they don't make good TV.
Right.
And now you're paying the price.
Right. The Trump administration is going to end. You're right. It seems, increasingly every day more likely that Trump is not going to win this. I mean, knock on wood. Especially, we talk about who took the SATs for him. I wonder who took the Electoral College for him. I mean, it's probably Vlad, right? I mean, totally. So, but focusing on Biden,
78,000 non-voters or Jill Stein voters, or
no, there's truth in that, and clearly. I don't think he's going to have that same sort of support this round. But Biden. No. So let's obviously the big thing with Biden is who is going to be his VP pick, and it seems more likely than not that it's going to be a woman, and most likely a woman of color. But and look, the criticism that's been levied against Kamala for being too ambitious or just want to do it because she wants to be president. I mean, there's clearly a level of sexism, misogyny, of course, in the underpinning of this. But I have to say, for the Biden camp. I feel a little bit like they're moving into theatrics here. To keep a theme of TV shows, it feels kind of like The Bachelor. Like, what's he going to do? Come down these staircases and give the Bill of Rights to whoever his VP pick is? I mean, would we be doing this sort of theatrical sort of, hand wringing if it was going to be a man? I mean, do you think that this is in fact a little bit of a double standard in terms of how they're kind of drawing this out, or is it really just because of genuine fear of alienating a voter group?
Well, yeah, I mean there is the serious concern about the Sanders voters or the former Jill Steiners or whomever, taking it on the heel and toe because they don't like the woman of color that he picks is just, it's a maddening argument to have.
Right.
And yes, there are the TYTs of the world that will drive that voter block away to some degree actively. And I'm no fan of them because of that specific thing. But timing wise, it's no different than most presidential decisions. The only time it's come up, and is times when the candidate has been older, and there's been more of a concern about either encouraging younger voters or that this idea that their age might be a factor. Reagan, Bush is a great example of that. Bush was forced onto Reagan. There was a lot of drama about that. The post Lyndon Johnson and Truman both reinvigorated the idea that it does matter who's vice president, and then it ebbed and flowed for a while because you had the Cheney secondary presidency of Bush. The choosing of him was a big deal, and there was a lot of drama about that, but it was largely because you were choosing who the hand in the sock puppet was going to be, right? So the only reason we're freaking out about this is, one, we've all got nothing better to do. We're all locked down. And secondly, we forget history. I often say that people who forget history are doomed to repeat it. It's not because we go through the actions again. It's because we don't realize that we've already experienced this. We don't re-experience it or create these historical moments because of our ignorance in the moment, but because of lack of recognition. It's more of emotional change in things. The physical nature of this isn't going to change. He's going to choose within the next week. It'll be a week before the thing. People after this, once he's chosen somebody and they're already on the trail, all this rigmarole about it, most people in the news who are making a big deal of it, like the Andrea Mitchells of the world, will say to you, in all honesty, well, this president and this president and this president and this president didn't pick until the last 4-1. These two picked people that were their rivals. These two picked people that crapped on them during the primaries, voodoo economics being one of the main ones, around Bush, in terms of Reagan. You forget that there was that fight about that. Once we're into the next fight, which is the actual general with the team fighting back against this.
Clearly, this is, if you look at it in that construct, it's not devoid from the norm.
Nope.
But there is something different about this, right? I mean, look, we can talk about Cheney, we can talk about how awful Bush was and getting us into forever wars. There's criticism, from modern post-Nixon presidents, from Carter on forward, right? But this is Hal. I mean, this is clearly a different time. Whatever Trump is, I don't know exactly what box to put him in. This is something different. And I think that there is, in this case, you could say that Cheney was, the hand in the puppet. You could say that Dan Quayle was the younger. I mean, Al Gore was the leftist. I mean, there's all sorts of, ways that you choose a vice president to appeal to a different demographic. I think this is the first time that, most likely, if it's going to be a person of color and a black woman at that, that's what the rumors are out there. It's going to be probably the first time that the Democratic Party has really tried to appeal to the black community. I mean, I think that in of itself is a
I hear that a lot, and I hear this whole thing about like black women are the core of the Democratic Party or the block of the Democratic Party. What the only issue I have with that one is that statistically speaking, that is an incredibly small group of human beings in a 340 million person country. It is, somewhere in the order of 6 million people in total almost. And if you're talking about that particular, black women as the demographic.
Sure.
What the core of the Democratic Party is, these days especially, is black women and a lot of people from a lot of different racial backgrounds who care about what happens to black women.
I guess I'll use the word pander. You've had to pander to the Midwest to the,
Mm-hmm.
you have to, part of the strategy has to be the electoral college win, right?
Locking
And
down a state, right?
exactly. And so, again, the Democratic Party's always been able to lock down the coast, major cities, but clearly why Trump won was in large part because of his ability to take these swing states. So I think that there are those, and I'm not advocating this, but there are those in the Democratic Party that would defend a VP choice to appeal to what they would classify as more moderates. And, for me, there's not a lot of difference between a moderate who's afraid of a black woman and a racist. I mean, I think that, if you think that
I would actually argue that a black woman candidate, like the ones that are being vetted right now, specifically the two, including Karen Bass, but
Sure.
I mean, I would argue that Rice and Harris are the ones we're hearing about right now the most. And Harris, obviously, having the long legs of that being thrown up by myself last year as a potential ticket, by a lot of people. She appeals to moderates. There is this idea somehow that black people or black voters are somehow more liberal or lean more, with the whole Black Lives Matter is a Marxist idea, that somehow that's reflective of the black voting bloc, as it occurs.
Sure.
In terms of where they show up, that they are somehow, while they are absolutely liberal in regards to the benefit that government can do to people and righting wrongs and getting rid of redlining and eliminating policies and especially sort of the encoded racism of stuff that was meant to keep them kind of tamped down during the growth arcs of America, that answering that would be seen as liberal by a Republican. But as most moderates, both liberal and conservative in the country, aren't that far off base from a Karen Bass even, or
Sure.
Kamala Harris or whatever. So the same thing is true of presenting Kamala Harris to the world. She's not one that you're throwing in there just so that black people get one on the board and hyper liberal Marxist, BLM leaders, will go, oh, awesome. I don't care what she thinks.
You know what the word for that is? Hal? The word for that is token. She's not. Neither of them are tokens. And I think that's a very. You're right. I mean, these are people with substance.
Depth of policy positions.
Exactly. Yes. And so people can judge them not just on. They can judge them on their content, right? I mean, on substantive content. And I think, look, I mean, a lot of people in the black community have said early on when Kamala's name was floated that there was concern about her and her, in her role in prosecuting black people when, she's in California. And so this isn't, you're right. It isn't just a box checking, right? There is substance. And look, I mean, there's a reality with Biden also that it's very possible that he could, if he's elected, he could be a one-term president, right? So the vice president pick in this, historically you take a vice president, the vice president after, you serve 2 terms runs for president.
Yeah.
But this may be something very different that we haven't seen, going back to, to Nixon. I mean,
same thing was said about Reagan though. So Reagan was shot in his first term.
Right. That's right.
And
you're right.
And because of that wound, because of going into the hospital, whatever your beliefs about, Hinckley's brother or cousin having lunch with Bush's other son that day and watching from a window, all those lovely theories. Reagan, in reality, entered primary dementia during his first term, clinically, medically. Not, I think he's slipping, but legitimately. Got another term. Iran-Contra happened all during that second section. And still came away in 92 giving a speech, which was the barn burner at the Republican National Convention. That was, how, Bush became, Bush 1 became president.
But I have to say, kudos to his team. I mean, it's in a lot of ways, I think objectively, it's his race to lose. I mean, if your strategy, and that is working, by the way, is to keep your candidate just out of the spotlight, and you're winning against an incumbent, that's pretty telling. That's pretty remarkable to see a strategy like that.
That's true, but you can only do that with a known entity. which Biden
Yes.
is a known entity.
Right.
You
You're
know,
right.
None of his decision making about a lot of this stuff when it comes up is going to shock anyone.
Sure.
I mean, even when he moves to the furthest left that he's going to do on a particular policy, it is just a bubble appearing on an idea that already exists. It is not going to, there is, like all of Trump's attacks of Biden being radical about stuff are falling on deaf ears because nobody really believes it. He's an empathetic human being who has got a knowledge of policy. He understands trade. He understands the world stage, and he understands the threat from not just an, you know, a gilded tower idea of what a threat is like Trump has, but a legit one from, I lost family in a car accident. I took a train every day to work. This train breaks down. Everybody with me on that train can't go to work that day. And the cascading effect on their lives is enormous. So we need a structure in place where people can count on a functioning government and all those kind of things. A bad phrase, I guess, getting the trains to run on time is a bad reference in that regard. But in all honesty, understanding the threat to normal life, you know, and he's carried that with him. That's not going to change anytime soon.
Right.
And he doesn't have an issue, a hitch in his step where he thinks it differs for each racial class. That's the one thing that Biden has that stands out over all the other folks that were running, was that, you know, that his empathetic reflex doesn't stop at anybody's skin.
Right.
Ever. Even if
You're
it's
right.
their side. Even if I'm black, so I'm more empathetic to what's going on with a black person. I'm Hispanic, so I'm more empathetic. I understand their way and I can translate it for you like a Key and Peele sketch.
You know, has he ever said, I'm sorry? Has he ever said, I was wrong, I misspoke? No, his ego drives him to decisions to the edge of the cliff and beyond, because he can never, you know, and he can never pull back, right? Isn't that like this
sign of weakness, right?
Absolutely. And,
so,
you know, go ahead, sorry.
No, I was just going to say that I think that on top of the fact that Biden has been out in the public, Biden does make speeches. He's had these town halls where he has multiple guests on. He has one person from his campaign fielding people in. He has these long conversations with victims of gun violence, you know, single moms, people who are worried about sending their kids back to school, doctors and nurses who are on the front lines pushing against COVID. He has, and like you and I are doing right now, he's had multiple ones of these things, and the whole narrative of he's been in his basement this whole time is actually from the Trump campaign and carried to some degree by the media in this idea, because nobody's out physically doing rallies. And when Trump decides to, they become super spreader events. Right. So it's unfair, I think, for everybody to continue the narrative that Biden is somehow out of the public eye when he clearly is not. Yeah,
absolutely. That's a fair point.
And he's put out in the last month a 4-part table leg plan for the rebuilding of America, the Build Back Better thing, where he's talking about racial justice. He gave a speech on that. He gave a speech on economically, you know, both infrastructure and energy-wise, how we're going to be at the forefront, how many jobs we can create, where the investment structure comes from for that. And Trump in the last week has started parroting those and signing executive orders, which is not him being able to get a bill passed, is not him being able to bring coalitions together to actually solve the problems. It's just him signing a piece of paper that will die as soon as he leaves office, like every other EO that gets attacked by the incoming administration. So Biden himself is talking about structurally, I can reach out to Republicans and Democrats. I can bring them together on the stuff we agree on. I've done it. That's how he got the ACA passed. He was a major factor in that. And it actually got done. And those elements, I think, are lost on people right now because we're all in a basement. Like he who is not in their own bunker cast the first stone at this point.
You know, you spend time in China, and we obviously want to, you know, you speak Mandarin, right? So I guess which is what
my Chinese is pretty good. I speak fairly
well. Then I have to ask you, can you just because this is such an important thing, can you say, stop calling it the Chinese flu, you dick? Is that something you can say in Mandarin?
这个病没叫空 flu. 你是笨蛋. Like, this disease is not called the kung flu. Don't call it the kung flu. You
Perfect.
Idiot.
So I mean, And I have to ask, I mean, we've, there is criticism to be levied about China. And this is
Mhm.
my last question for you. I mean, there's a place to talk about China. We've talked a little bit about the
Yeah, human
racism that
rights.
exists.
Yeah, the issues they have as a society. Yeah, managing 1.2 billion people is going to create some authoritarian tourniquets in a
Absolutely.
society, no matter what. But
But I mean, can we also agree that calling it the Kung Fu flu or the
uh,
Chinese flu, I mean, that's not okay either, right? I mean,
no,
that's
no, no, and it has one purpose, which is to divert responsibility for
right,
the management of a disease in the United States to someone else. That it is effectively his way of saying it is not my fault. So if whatever happens from it, the 300,000 dead, the people who are living with kidney damage and lung damage for the rest of their lives because of this, the ischemic strokes, the effect on the economy, the 33% drop in GDP, all that. That's not my fault. This came in from the outside. China could have stopped it, but they chose not to. Therefore, it's not anything that's wrong, blame them, not me, which is not leadership for one. It's
right,
insane beyond that. And secondly, if they could have stopped it from leaving China, why couldn't he stop it from leaving Washington State?
right,
Is
right,
the
right.
obvious question. That's
In the
it.
in the in the words of Trump, it is what it is, right? I mean, it's this,
It's who he
simple
is.
till right, and again, it's it is
He
what it
also,
is,
by the
and
way, I want to say also that he has they have his team puts it in as China virus in his papers so that he doesn't say Chinese virus, so that they can argue there's a distinction between the
right,
country and the people.
that's right.
The
That's
Chinese
actually
people, it's not, they go, well, we're not going to get him to stop saying it. So don't let him write Kung Flu in felt pen on in Sharpie over top of it and cross it out like he does sometimes. Write China virus. He'll say China virus. Then we're this close to calling it the CCP virus, which a lot of people in China call it
right.
under the table. They blame the CCP for its spread, not, and mainly because they were trying to save face and they didn't jump on it fast enough. The exact same way, by the way, that Donald Trump did. There is almost no distinct difference, with the exception of the authoritarian, welding people in their apartments kind of stuff that the Chinese government ultimately did. There
Right.
is no difference between the leadership and how they handled it, between Xi Jinping and Donald Trump, in terms of, I don't want to hear about it. It's messing with it. Everything's fine. I'm working on stuff. It makes me look bad. I'm not interested in bad news. Give me the good news only. I'll tell people the good news. We'll blow smoke up our own keister and
Right.
call it a day. We'll just pretend it'll be gone. And like any other threat, H1N1, SARS, MERS, they come and go. And 10 years from now, nobody remembers the attack, blah, blah, blah. We'll just let it go with that. And
Well,
Xi Jinping and Donald Trump had a very similar reaction to it, and they had a very similar result. The only difference is China has a much easier time hiding in the media the death toll and the sick toll in the country.
for you, Hal, where do these
Yeah.
people end up? Are they going to be on? Is it? I know Trump wants to do OAN or God knows what else, but where do they go? Are they hireable? Are we going to look at this administration when they leave as what it really was, and anyone associated with it is going to have be marked and not kind of get a position at Harvard or not get on CNN? Like, what are we going to see here with these people? Are they going to be are they going to be Billy Bushed? I mean, what's going to happen to them?
Billy Bush, unfortunately, had the distinction of being, nearby and goading this guy into speaking like he really speaks, but
Right.
not having any kind of policy position that can be rehabbed later.
Right.
Billy Bush has no inherent worth media-wise, other than the fact that he was standing near a bomb when it went off in some ways. And that has a short lifespan. We have seen people who were the architects of the torture policy under the
Sure.
Bush administration end up being asked on the news as national security,
Right.
experts and pundits. There's going to be a lot of book writing and a lot of hand wringing and distancing in some cases, and other people who will tick onto this dog until it runs out of blood. And there's at least an 8 to 10 year window of prurient interest in the Trump family and all their BS after the presidency that will become the cartoon of our time. Him, complaining about Biden at every turn, him making fun of whoever the next president is, him being a spoiler from, Turnberry because he's interestingly staying out of the country during the times when SDNY are,
Right.
subpoenaing all these kind of things. As we watch, all this happening, and Trump Tower Moscow gets greenlit, and and Trump Tower Beijing gets greenlit, and everybody who says "I told you so" starts saying "I told you so," but we've all gone back to fixing the tires on the broken down car, and we don't have time for who screwed up the radio at this point.
Right.
Is really how it's going to feel, just like post Bush.
Yeah. January 21st, 2021.
Yeah.
Stephen Miller's out of a job. What's he going to do? Just paint us a picture to sing us out to.
Well, he's going to be an executive position at OAN or whatever Trump's media circus thing is, because he knows where the bodies are buried, so they're going to need to pay him to do a job. But he's poison on camera, even for the right. Like, nobody, even if you like what he's saying, you don't like him being the one saying it. So he'll be drafting the statements, running the Sinclair TV group kind of stuff, where they coordinate amongst 5 stations a message that is a complete lie, totally racist, horrifying, and forgives Confederate generals and Nazis and odd marching people. That's his mandate. And let me tell you, that's a growth industry. Because it's based on percentages. And when you've got 10 and you suddenly have 100, by every other metric, that's garbage. But in their world, it's amazing. If I post something on Twitter and I only get, 80 hits because I've got 100,000 followers, that's a little depressing, for me. I'm like, well, it should hit a little better. But if you're a lone, white supremacist psychopath fan of Stephen Miller, and you post something and it gets 150 because half are bots and the other half are nudnik weirdos like you, they're like, holy smokes, I have friends I never knew. And that's one of the downsides of social media. And bulletin boards taught us this about child molesters and people like that it's a connecting flesh for them.
It normalizes it.
Yeah. And it allows them to connect in ways that they couldn't in public without, getting hammered. What you will see is a rise in overt social media, meaning real faces, real names, people, like paying for a service so that everybody on there is legit. Twitter premium versus Twitter, proletariat, or is the idea, like, how do I know the accounts I'm interacting with are real versus not real? That people will pay a premium for that going forward.